Meeting of the Tiverton Town Council with pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a roll call, please.
Council Lambert.
Present.
Councilor Roderick.
Present.
Councilor Durfee. Present. Councilor Boland.
Yeah.
Councilor Leonard.
Present.
Councilor Costa. Yeah. Councilor Aruda is absent.
Tonight's consent agenda consists of the approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting of April 12, 2010, approval of executive session minutes of April 12, 2010, receipt of minutes from the following boards and commissions: Economic Development Commission, Tiverton Library Committee, Zoning Board of Review, Cemetery Commission, Wastewater Management Commission, Prevention Coalition, Board of Canvassers, Municipal Building Advisory Committee, and Recreation Commission. Correspondence received and filed. Received a resolution opposing mandatory binding arbitration legislation from Town of Middletown, Town of West Warwick, Town of East Greenwich, and City of East Providence. Received resolution opposing endless contracts from the Town of West Warwick, Town of Middletown, and City of East Greenwich. Received resolution encouraging return of 34th America's Cup Challenge to Newport from Town of Charleston, City of East Providence, Town of Warren, and Town of Narragansett. Received resolution supporting establishing a Blue Alert program from the Town of Jamestown and Town of Narragansett. Received resolution urging General Assembly enact legislation for bicycle safety from Town of Jamestown. Received resolution supporting legislation requiring seatbelts on school buses from the Town of Warren. Received resolution supporting legislative amendments to protect Rhode Island cities and towns and public officials and employees from the City of East Providence. Received resolution supporting relief of mandatory programs from Town of West Warwick. Received resolution supporting postponing budget and financial town meeting for fiscal year 2010-11 from Town of Forster. Received from Town of South Kingstown knowledge and Tiverton's proposed legislation to allow postponing financial town meeting for fiscal year 2011. And received from Town of North Kingston resolution supporting Rhode Island National Guard Living Memorial donation. Planning Board, a draft zoning ordinance text amendment regarding new article titled Wind Energy Conservation Facilities. Request public hearing June 14th. Planning Board recommendation regarding zoning official ordinance text and map amendment request submitted by Tiverton Yacht Club continued from January 25th for ethics advisory opinions, further continued to May 10th. Alex Chico requests approval of 5K run, walk, and bike ride memorial for John Toulon on July 31st with rain date August 7th, subject to meeting police chief requirements. Chief's memo attached. Approval of public hearing for noise ordinance at 69 Nanaquacket on July 31st for live music on May 24th. That's tonight's consent agenda. I'd like to remove item 6, which is the request for the walk-run.
Make a motion that with the exception of item 6.
I'm sorry. I wanted to remove item number 5.
Make a motion that with the exception of item 5 and item 6 pertaining to the walk-run, we approve the consent agenda.
Second it.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Councilor Lambert, you're up with number 5.
Number 5 relates to the Planning Board recommendation regarding the zoning ordinance text and map amendment request submitted by the Tiverton Yacht Club. And it continues indicating continued from January 25th for ethics advisory opinions. I really have 2 questions. One is, are we still waiting for the all of the advisory opinions? And number 2, is there any other reason why we're continuing it?
Could I add one item? I think one of the reasons is that there are a couple of members of the council who are waiting for a response from the Ethics Commission as to whether or not
That was, yeah, that was.
Was that one of your?
Yeah, that was my question. I was
Okay.
just wondering why we're continuing it and whether we've received the advisory opinion.
I'm one of those councils in question. I've received no response.
Okay.
And that's the only reason that we have, the solicitor hasn't received a response yet.
Yeah.
So it's the very next meeting. I just keep putting it to the very next one in hopes that we'll get the response.
And really, a second part of the question was when I saw this on the agenda, I mean, this this goes back in history, this dispute, well before I was living here. And I think that there are some of us here on the council who may not be familiar with all of the historical background. What I would request when this does come up for our vote on the town council, that the town clerk, maybe the town administrator, try to gather, I think I'm speaking for Ed perhaps as well, anything that would give us some historical background, so that we can put all of this in context and not try to reinvent the wheel. That was it. Thank you, Hannibal.
The reason I asked that number 6 be pulled was it was brought to my attention that on the bike rides, the 10-mile ride, was taking a left on Betancourt Lane, which is a private road, and so some of the information here on the fact sheet doesn't seem to, fit. Chief, do you have any, because it's,
It's a 5 mile. It's 5 miles, not 10, is it?
on the 10-mile ride,
Crosses Betancourt Lane, which, it's not,
takes
I just
a left on
recently-
Betancourt.
yeah.
I just recently met for the first time with Ms. Toolin and the other gentleman, and we're just, in its infancy, setting this routes up and working at parking and bathroom facilities and litter control. This is just real preliminary information that we have to date. So, we'd like to get more time with this and get back. It's scheduled for August, I believe, right, Ms. Toolin?
July 31st.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
My only concern was, are we approving, because you attached, there's an attachment of the rides and walks along with this, approving that is approving something, and seeing that brought to my attention that was on a private road. I think maybe there's some adjustment should be made to these
I think we
routes.
should revisit it and get back with the folks and look at the other, I had some other questions I did want to discuss with them.
Okay.
And Mrs. Toolin's, Alex was out of town, he's in Pennsylvania, so we're trying to get in touch. We'll work it out and get back to you if that's okay.
Okay, then I'd
I'll make
entertain a motion to
that we,
continue.
Continue it to our first meeting in May.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion to continue to the first meeting in May. Been seconded, discussion, seeing none, all those in favor? The motion carries.
Yeah, Mr. President, I
Yes.
just want to make sure, did we need a motion on number 5, since we took it off, to continue it to May 10th?
No, yes, we do.
I'll make the motion to continue the matter identified in item 5 to May 10th.
Yeah, I'll second that.
A motion made and seconded to continue the Yacht Club issue to May 10th. Discussion, seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Sitting as a Board of License and Commissioners, request from Charles Mulcahy of 65 Beach Avenue, approval of a private detective license. I think we're waiting for response from the chief.
Regarding the detective license for Mr. Mulcahy, there's no objections, no disqualifiers.
Thank
Would
you.
recommend approval.
Is that with review by whatever was in Massachusetts that we discussed at the
Yes.
last meeting? Yeah.
The
Okay.
other gentleman's matters were not related at all with,
I'll make a motion that we renew the private detective license for the term as stated from April 13th, 2010 to April 12th, 2011.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. A request from Roger DuPont, 28 Salisbury Street, approval of annual renewal of private detective license.
Again, Mr. President, no disqualifiers. Recommend the council approve.
I'll make another motion to renew the private detective license for the term May 15th, 2010 to May 14th, 2011.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, seeing none, all those in favor? Approved.
Thank you.
Nancy Walker doing business as Artisans Antiques at 2423 Main Road. Request approval of antique license subject to meeting all legal requirements.
I make a motion that we approve the license subject to all legal requirements.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Unfinished business, approval of petition for Verizon New England Narragansett Electric for 3 new joint poles and relocate 1 joint pole on Cornell Road. Response from Steve Bellucci, DPW Director. Continued for solicitor's review from the April 12th meeting. The solicitor's response attached.
I don't have any response attached, Mr. Chairman.
His memorandum?
Yeah.
It's the next one.
It's actually the next set of documents there, Hannibal.
Okay.
Basically, I take it that this memorandum is saying that if they attach anything else to the poles, they have to negotiate with us.
Correct, that's, the gist of the memo is that the approval is for the wiring only.
Where is this taking place? Where is this taking place?
Cornell Road.
Cornell Road?
I am going to assume that that's going into the new development. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just ask a question?
You sure may.
As when I look at the land, there are existing poles, and then we have the proposed poles. So I assume there are wires already running to the existing?
Well, they're probably, yeah, but they're-
And can I make the assumption that they're also carrying more than just electrical?
I'm sure they'd carry telephone wires also if the telephone company wants them. As a matter of fact, they usually come in with a joint request.
Well, because I'm saying, when I look at the solicitors, thing saying that they have to renegotiate regarding any other power, voice, data, electromagnetic transmissions, I'm going to assume, since there's already existing poles and wires there, that this stuff must already be there also?
no, that's, I believe that we had a request recently, and it was for some new type of device to put on the poles that was going to be for additional service. And I believe what this is saying is that they can be used for the power, voice, data, and other electromagnetic, including but not the wireless service. But they can't use it for this new stuff. They can only use it for what the old wires and poles were there for. Like you say, running up to that first pole in the map, they're extending what they currently have there, but can't add new services.
And if we adopt the motion, I think we should adopt the provisions that the town solicitor has put forward and
Yes.
incorporate those in the motion.
Yes.
So I will make a motion that the petition be granted to place the 3 joint poles and relocate 1 joint pole, but that the conditions for the approval are the numbered 1 and 2 as set forth
In the memorandum.
in the memorandum of April 21st by Rosillo, Tights, and Rich.
I'll second that motion.
We have motion and second, discussion.
The only question, if I
Yes.
may. I think what this item does, for me anyway, gives me the opportunity to speak on something I observe around the town. Many of these poles are carrying 4, 5, and 6 cables, which I think is a dangerous situation. Furthermore, there are some locations in town where I would call what I see a rat's nest. I would ask the utility companies to clean it up, if you would, at their first convenience. Otherwise, I would move the question.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Pass. Next order of business is the distribution of the quarterly investment reports continued from the April 12th meeting.
I think I was the person that asked that these reports be carried over to this meeting, and I'd like to just, so that the council can follow, 2 for you, 1 for Mr. Lambert. Um, 3 over there. Let me make sure you have a copy of this. Mr. Dean, do you have it? Here's my issue.
Okay.
On successive meeting dates, we received 2 reports from you, one for February. And on the yellow copy, this is the one that's dated February 28th, 2010, and it shows that Washington Trust, we had a certificate of deposit, actually it was a 2-month certificate of $4 million.
Right.
Carrying a interest rate of 0.85%.
Correct.
Okay. The following meeting, we received another report. And what I was trying to do is track the,
The report that you received was at the end of March. It was a different time frame.
well, no, I understand. I understand that. But taking your first report, it shows that that CD was due on March 18th, 2010.
Right.
Okay, so I look at the next report that followed 2 weeks later, and I say, okay, what happened to the March 18th CD?
The March 18th CD.
And it's not reconcilable. Dated deposit, which I assume was the date of the rollover, we show a balance of $500,000, and yet, at a very much reduced rate. So my question was, what happened to that Washington Trust initial CD? That
The
was,
initial CD came term. Washington Trust,
hold on,
uh,
it came to term, according to your records, on 3/18.
right, and then it was reinvested at the current ongoing rate. And the current ongoing rate is on the new report, which now is at 0.65. So the actual reality, the rates are dropping. And then what
Well,
happened
no,
was...
stop.
Okay?
Because if you, that shows that it was dated deposit of 2/15. So are you saying that you called it early to get a lower rate?
No.
Then it went, if that's the same.
What happens is, with Washington Trust, there is, even though you're committing for 60 days, they only go out 30 days in reality. So they go out twice. They go out once for 30 days, and you get your interest, and then they go out another 30 days. So it's 2 months of a jump, so to speak. But you're frozen in on the rate that you agreed to for the 60-day period. So the interest is not credited until the 30 days have expired.
Wait a minute.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Yes.
Don't mind? Okay. And I think I know where Ms. Durfee is going, but I'm looking at it too, saying maturity date was 3/18 at a interest rate of 0.85, correct?
Correct.
All right. You're telling me that it cycles every 30 days, but you just stated that we were locked into the original rate of 0.85.
Correct.
All right. Then on the March 31st thing, you're telling me that it was, the date of deposit was changed or reissued, quote unquote, on 2/15
Correct.
at 0.65.
Right.
So why would we lose interest if you're telling me that even though they go out every 30 days, if we were locked in at 0.85? Yeah, if-
That was
if
my,
that was your question?
that's my
Is that
point
your
exactly.
Okay, let me check into that. I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
I will,
And
what I'd
also-
like to do...
I know that
Yeah,
banks
they reissue.
but if we're
But let me
locked in
give
at
you the state of the
0.85,
nation today.
Well,
Today is...
I don't need the stat. I just
Well,
wanted
don't
that.
you want to know where we stand? I
Well,
mean,
I'd like to see it in writing, frankly.
well, I have bank statements, I
But
don't have things
also,
in writing.
you know, when you talk about a maturity date of,
Yes.
of 60 days, that is misleading. If you're saying it gets repriced in 30. So, when you look at the first report, it looks like, hey, it's a 60-day note. We never use that $4 million for a period of time. You probably could go out farther and get a better rate.
That's if I didn't need it.
Yeah, well, you haven't needed it since
Well,
January.
we've had some significant payments since we've spoken.
Yes.
Since then, we've had the $1.7 million payment for the Ryback bonds. We had a $257,000 payment. We've had payrolls of close to $1 million every 2 weeks. We've had Blue Cross and Blue Shield, which kicks into about $500,000.
And we've had the last payments of the quarterly periods for taxes on April 1st
Right.
and the 10th. So,
I'm holding on to that rather than investing it, to be honest with you, because I need that money rather than throwing it out to Washington Trust and bringing it back, because I know I have subsequent payrolls coming in. What I'm trying to do is to hold that money and get the best rate that I possibly can. But I do not want to go out more than 60 days.
I'm not, well, I guess that's an issue that I would leave
Well, let me-
with
if
the
I could,
treasurer.
Ms.
But I think
Durfee,
the issue,
I
when
will
you
find
get a
your
report
question.
like this,
I will find the answer out. There's no question to that. I
Okay.
mean, the
Can
rates
you-
are what they are. But as we stand here tonight, we have $7,852 sitting in the money market at Washington Trust, earning 0.40%. We have $4,001,988 sitting in, and with a maturity date of 5/13. That's a CD, and that's sitting at 0.65. And then we have another $2,500,000 coming mature on 5/6, sitting at 0.50.
Did you say that that 4 million has gone out now to when?
513.
513. So, and that's the same $4 million that you invested
Absolutely.
on 1/21/2010.
That's correct.
See, that is a point that I just, you invested it for 60 days, and really, you've invested it and rolled it over for 5 months. There's a better rate attached to a 5-month than a 30-day repriced every 30 days.
I don't commit the money.
No, I'm just
until
wondering about
such
the
time.
cash
But,
management.
first of all, we had to have our collections coming in, and we had to see what the tax collections would be for the period. And then I held on to that money to the point where in which, after the tax collector came up with the amount of money that she collected, she then turned to me, and I then put into action this kick-out of, that's why I have that $1,007,852 sitting in a money market at .40. So the fluctuations occur because of need, not necessarily because we're gonna make a big bang for our buck. There is no big money to be made when you're talking less than 1%, Louise. You know that.
Every dollar in this
I know.
environment matters.
Right.
And it's the cash management that we expect you to maximize.
But it's the
I don't see it here.
I see the security as being my number one issue. And this is not big money here. When we're talking $5,000, $2,000, I recognize every dollar counts. However, we always have to have a backup plan, just in case collections do not come in.
Well, I guess they came in, as they always do, each quarterly.
Well-
But I have another question.
Go ahead.
All of a sudden, we have gone to Washington Trust after, and Washington Trust is a fine institution, but they service South County. They don't service this area. Now, what was it about Washington Trust that caused most of our money now to be in Washington Trust?
First of all, it was the flexibility which they provided. When I turned to Citizens Bank and asked for competitive rates for the same periods of time, and I didn't want to go out extensively for short periods, I found that the rates were very low. For example, a going out 30 days at Citizens Bank would have given me 0.05 or 0.18. So when I saw these very, very low rates, I had to look for a spot where in which we could maximize the dollar. That's why I went out. It's not that I like one bank over another. I go where the wind blows for the greatest interest rate.
Well, for example, Bank of Newport, it's a local bank, they pay taxes here in the town. We have very limited funds in Bank Newport. They
We do?
service the community,
We do?
according to your record.
No. Well, there's a lot of money at the bank, not necessarily shown here. Not everything is shown here, Louise. You have the cemetery accounts, which are in the $500,000 range. You have the school department, which has close to $600,000 sitting in Bank Newport. And we also have to recognize the issue of the $250,000 limitation. And when we go through a CEDAS program does not, Washington Trust does not hold the liability. What it does, it distributes the liability, such that if I give them $1 million, they're on the hook only for $250,000, and their, quote, connected banks within the CEDAS program stand behind them and put up the other $250,000 in collateralization. So my first priority is basically, the safekeeping of the money, number one. Number two, meeting our debts and obligations on time. And the third thing is getting the best dollar we can.
I think I would like to see the comparable rates when you, all of a sudden, 7 million of the general fund is in one bank, Washington Trust.
Right.
As I said, it's a fine institution, but it's not a service. They don't service the community here. They don't provide charitable contributions to this community. I'd sort of like to see how these rates compare to other comparable institutions that cause us, or make sure, or cause you to invest so much in Washington Trust. So You can answer that at the next time when you correct this other problem.
I will find you the answer. I always try to.
Okay.
Well, if I can just make a comment, I think this is all helpful from an informational viewpoint. And I want to thank Phil for providing us with this information. Whatever answers you can provide to Ms. Durfee are fine with me. But I really think that as a town council, we should try to avoid, we should try to avoid second-guessing the treasurer. I think for informational purposes, fine. He can outline for us some of the factors. But, you know, we may or may not have factors that he's not willing to put high on the priority list. And then I think we have to be careful that, you know, it's fine, for example, as Ms. Durfee has said, that they have more of a connection with the community. And then I think that makes sense. But, you know, where do you fit that in making your final judgment call as to where to put this money? And I really would urge that the town council to avoid any suggestion at all that we may be directing these accounts rather than the treasurer. That's his job.
I'm not directing.
And I understand, I
Okay.
understand.
And let me say one thing. When I get irreconcilable reports,
That I understand.
you understand that.
I understand
Okay.
that, but
And
I
also-
really am getting concerned about the idea that we can second-guess the treasurer on these items, since, as I say, his inventory of items that he may be considering before making an investment may or may not be what we're looking at. And
If the
I think
treasurer,
it makes sense to raise these issues as Ms. Durfee has, but I
Okay.
think we have to know where the line is as well.
okay, I would only say that if there's anything confidential, he could always do it in executive session with us, that there's something not apparent. But I do get concerned when I see cash management, and perhaps we're losing an opportunity.
We don't lose any opportunities, Louise.
Well, you're going to have to persuade me a lot of
I
that.
will.
Well, you haven't thus far. Just for the
Louise,
record.
we've already made $100,000 in interest income. As looking through all of the investment programs that we've had.
You know-
Now, I anticipate, let me finish, I anticipate making much more. We have 2 months to go. Every day, I'm watching that. I want you to feel comfortable. I just have a feeling that, you know, if, for example, you have an issue, please pick up the phone and call me. Don't wait 2 weeks until the next council meeting. If you have a suggestion, and I'm open to suggestions, there is no need to delay it for 2 weeks. Just pick up the phone and call me.
Bill?
I'm as accessible as Mr. Gonzo.
We deal with transparency in this council. So,
No, transparent, we work together as a team. We
Well-
work with teamwork first.
transparency seems to be the word of the day.
Well, it's
And
used
these are
and it's
not.
abused. It's used and abused, Louise. But
Really?
this is a team, and if you can work with me and give me some suggestions or give me ideas, I welcome them. But not to wait 2 weeks until the next council meeting. That doesn't make sense at all, and it doesn't make dollars.
I don't think so either.
Well, you take care of that,
That's
Mr.
probably the
Yeah.
position.
DiMatteo.
Moving on, the next item on the agenda is the town council. The standby motion to approve excess levy for financial town meeting. Continued from March 22nd council meeting, relocated on the agenda and not discussed.
Before we get into any general discussion, can I ask a question, Mr. President?
Yes, you
Maybe
may.
maybe Gene can help us out. The standby motion to approve an excess levy. Well, let me see how I can phrase this. It seems to me to be awkward to go to a financial town meeting and have them authorize exceeding the cap, and then it comes to the council and they have to make a motion to approve it. If it doesn't approve it, I mean, where are we? I mean, what can we do that lessens the tension that springs from this whole issue?
I don't know that there's a way to lessen the contention at this point. I think the question of interpretation of that statute is something that we've pretty much decided a judge is going to have to help us with. At this point, our interpretation of the statute is that the majority of the electors present would have to vote to approve the excess levy, and then it would have to come here. Having a standby motion seems to make sense so that if it's necessary, if it's needed, if it's wanted, it's already written. I don't know that there's a way to alleviate the contention right now. I think we need to have a judge.
When do we make this motion?
I don't think the motion has to be made unless
Yeah,
somebody,
It doesn't have to be made at all.
That's
No,
right.
that's right. If somebody doesn't vote, if somebody at the financial town meeting doesn't pass a number that will exceed the cap, there is no reason for it. So
That's
to say
correct.
to approve a standby motion, the motion to me would be made if someone voted for a number that exceeded the cap, then, and I'm not even sure it's necessary then. If someone's told at the financial town meeting that a vote they're about to take would put them in excess of the cap, and they vote in the affirmative, is that not a vote to exceed the cap?
That's exactly my point, Mr.
Well,
President.
I mean, this is a legal question, but
This motion is a fiction. As I understand it, and this is the argument that I've heard at the town council, is that anybody can get up and make a motion with a number that exceeds the cap. That person doesn't have to explain what the basis of his number is. And then we, after the fact, or before the fact, if we're voting now, we pretend that we're explaining the basis on which that person raised the motion and on what basis he arrived at those numbers. That's a total fiction. For example, it says that it's based on the fact that the non-property tax revenues will lead to an increase in the tax levy by 4.5%, that we're doing this, quote, because the majority of the electors present and voting at the financial town meeting shall also approve the excess levy. We don't know what's going through that person's mind. If I followed the arguments that have been made at the town council, nobody has to explain the basis for their motion, and what we're trying to do in advance is try to explain the motion of a person we don't even know, and we can't even identify.
But my point is strictly that if someone gets up and proposes a number for the budget that we know, because we have the number of the 4.5% and what the total number is, if a motion comes from the floor that would exceed that number, I think the explanation has to be prior to a vote on the motion, that motion would in fact take us above that number, which is the cap. And in doing so, a vote in the affirmative would also be the vote to exceed the cap because they were told prior to taking the vote. So I'm not sure that we even need to have
You know what?
That's right.
It's going to come up very quickly because we're all sitting here. We know that first vote is going to be a school vote. And the budget committee will say, we gave you an appropriation of $1. And I would anticipate that the chairman of the school board would get up and say, I make a motion of X. And I would anticipate at that point, we will be in a discussion, yes, we will exceed the cap. And so be it. I mean, so be it, the people at the financial town meeting will decide. I guess all we're saying is, this may not be a necessary motion.
Yeah, is it prudent for us to pass a motion like this without knowing what the numbers are?
I agree. I don't think this motion should be made now. I
Well-
think it's in the hands of the voters at the financial town meeting.
And I agree,
I
and I'll
think-
make a motion that we
I think the-
disapprove the
can I-
resolution.
No.
I'm going to allow the solicitor to give us some information
We
prior to.
we have written information
Okay.
from the solicitor already.
The statute is not just if the majority of the electors present approve an excess levy. The statute says shall also approve the excess levy. The first two paragraphs are a required finding in order to exceed the levy, and the majority of the electors present must approve that. But you've got to have the prior condition as the reason to exceed the levy. It just can't be that the majority of the electors vote to exceed it.
Okay.
Mr. President,
I'm not
that,
quite sure what you said.
excuse me, Mr. President, that differs with what Mr. Tights has given us in writing earlier, where, and I quote, "Notwithstanding anything herein to the contrary, nothing in this policy shall be deemed to impair the authority of the financial town meeting to exceed the cap set forth in acts under Articles so-and-so and such of the Constitution, Title 45 of the General Laws of Rhode Island," which he then verbally went on to explain is that if the electors at the financial town meeting wanted to pass on the budget above the cap, they were perfectly able to do that.
Okay.
That's
And then,
what it says.
and I go back to my assertion that takes us back to the bake sale ruling, which I think somebody is trying to figure out. If in fact, a number is voted at the financial town meeting which would exceed what the state would allow you to go over the cap, if in fact they would allow you to go over the cap, we would have to find another way to raise the money because it couldn't be generated through the tax levy.
Okay,
No,
we
I
hope to
think
have that
that,
information.
well, that's the reason
In
for, I think, the vote we took last week to see if there was a number that we would be allowed to, so that information will be available at the financial town meeting.
Have we got a response to that request for just the
I
information?
don't know, Jim?
No, the request is at the state level, and what's holding it up is the Department of Revenue has a new chief who started today, and the temporary chief has not, did not want to make that decision. What they wanted to do is have, the new chief involved.
So, and I think we have two different issues. One is, do we need the resolution? And I'll still make my motion that we vote this resolution down. The other question is, what happens if the financial town meeting passes something above the cap? That's I'll call it the bake sale scenario. That's a different issue than
Can I make-
the motion.
Right.
Can I make just a thought
I
on
made a
that?
motion, thank you.
All right.
I
would-
will second the motion.
We have
See,
we have
I
a
th-
motion, a second, now we're open for discussion.
Okay.
Don't go away, you'll be recognized.
I think it should be really a motion to table it, and not even tip our hand with regard to a disapproval, because that may carry a connotation that the council will disapprove an excess levy. I think we should leave it to the financial town meeting or take no action on it. So I would like to persuade the colleagues to say we'll take no action on it.
With-
Mr. Nelson.
My question is on a related matter, not directly associated with this, but related to a statement that Mr. Gonzalo just made. So perhaps I should sit and come back?
It's not
It's
related.
not,
It's not
It's
related.
related to the tax levy. It's
Okay.
related to the proposed tax change documentation that we've sent to the state.
Okay. I think that is a different issue. We will hear you on the matter after we deal with the resolution.
Thank you.
Good evening. Rob Coulter, Tiverton. I was wondering if I could perhaps ask you to direct a question to your solicitor. My understanding is that the solicitor's law firm is representing Barrington, and they have already made some position statements on how they're going to go about taking a 4/5 vote or whether they're going to take one at all. That might be germane to what you're trying to resolve here.
where did you get this kind of information? I'm not aware that has taken place.
I read it in the Secana Times maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago that the town administrator of Barrington was applying to get a waiver and break the cap, but that it would require a 4/5 vote of their town council before sending it to approval. I'm under the impression, I could be wrong, that your firm represents that town as well. I've just thought maybe that might help you resolve this dilemma, if that's true.
Well,
Thank you.
Our firm does represent Barrington, but unfortunately, I don't know what action or decisions or discussions have been had. It might be something that Mr. Tights would know about if you want to, he'll be here later in the meeting.
You know, basically, we have not applied for the waiver. I don't know how many times the council can take that position, but we say it at every meeting. We have asked for information that would, having submitted information, what are the parameters if we were to be entitled, if the financial town meeting voted in excess of the cap, what is the parameter of that vote? What is the cap, in other words? And I don't know how many times we can say that, but we are not applying for a waiver, because it's not us that will be involved in the waiver, it will be the financial town meeting.
Well, that really gets us back to this motion.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, and this is really an argument that was first raised in response to some of the issues that I've been discussing, and that is, no one at the financial town meeting is under any obligation to explain his vote. It could be for any ridiculous reason. I've just decided it should be 8.2, 9.01, anything within the 9.04, which, by the way, is the numbers, the percentage that we're involved with now that we're with the state. And let me read that, by the way. This is part of the package that was sent to Jill Barrett at the Division of Property Valuation and Municipal Finance. And I'm quoting, quote, "Notice of proposed tax rate change." Quote, "The town of Tiverton proposes to increase its property tax levy to $35,097,367 in the 2010-2011 budget year. The property tax levy this year is $32,187,295, and in bold lettering, this is a proposed increase of 9.04. But getting back to this motion, while I believe that as a town council, we have to be cognizant of what the rules are for asking for an excess, I don't believe that has to be done at the financial town meeting. They can be informed that over 4.5%, you're exceeding the cap, but they don't have to explain it. Then, presumably, it'll come back to the town council. We can make these representations, for example, that we fall within the following exceptions to the statute. We can make the representation that this excess levy is due to a loss in total non-tax revenue. We can make those representations to the state if we try to get certification after the fact. But as far as I'm concerned, this is just totally irrelevant to the financial town meeting as a motion. If you were to ask somebody who made the motion at the financial town meeting, why are you proposing 7.5, 8.4? Why are you doing that? And his answer could honestly be, and appropriately so, it's none of your business.
Then I don't see a motion like that passing.
That's why I'm
I mean,
opposed to
the
this
town of
motion.
Tiverton is not a bunch of idiots.
I agree with you, but my point is, why are we trying to read the mind of the person who may stand up and say, I propose an increase in the levy of 9.04%. We don't have to do it at the financial town meeting. This is a job for the town
Well,
council,
the point,
and it's a
but
job
the
for the people.
point is,
in Providence.
no one at the floor of the financial town meeting is going to propose anything to do with the levy. They're going to vote on real numbers.
On real-
Okay?
I
They're going to vote on real numbers.
I agree.
I think it is imperative upon us to be able to say, as each number is presented and each vote is being taken, what that does in terms of the position we're at, in terms of this law, which puts a cap at 4.5%. I don't see any reason for us to be passing a standby motion. I think if that number should exceed, a document like this we can have, and then someone can make a motion based on the numbers that they wish to appropriate. If it does put us in a position, then you have to have a motion that explains where you're going and what you're doing. But I really would like to have numbers going in, irrelevant to this, because I'm not in favor of passing a motion to exceed something when right now the recommended budget is below that number. Should that budget pass, moot point about whatever we're doing with resolutions and motions. And again, I still believe that if somebody is told that a vote on this particular motion at the floor of the financial town meeting would exceed the cap, and an affirmative vote is taken, then I think they voted by a majority vote to exceed the cap. And then we would have to go and seek certification for the number that was appropriated. And sure, we better hope that it falls within the number that we may be granted a waiver if it's necessary.
Mr. President, could I ask for the reading of the motion? What motion is there on the table?
I've raised my hand.
Caesar's.
Whenever I have it clear.
My motion is simply to disapprove the proposed motion.
Disapprove this?
Yes, yes. And the reason I say that is that I think we just need to wipe the slate clean. I heard Ms. Durfee's thing about her point, not a thing, excuse me, her point that we may be influencing people. And I think that if we leave it tabled, we could be accused of trying to influence people. I think that the citizens of Tiverton have made it perfectly clear that they want the financial town meeting on 3 different occasions recently, over the past several years, that they want that decision made at the financial town meeting. We have set it up, and when I say we, I mean everybody. The Budget Committee has a recommendation. They've done their job. They stayed under the 4.5 cap. We have respectfully disagreed with their recommendation and said we should have more for the municipality. The school board has done their job, and they've told the Budget Committee, we respectfully disagree. We think we should have more. If I may, the options are all there. Now it's up to the voters. And I think that leaving this hanging around could be construed one way or the other, and I think just moving it off and being done with it is the way to go. Then we'll deal with whatever the facts are after the financial town meeting and the voters have had their say. And then we have to figure out where to go from there, whatever that may be. But I don't think anybody on this council thinks that the voters of the town are illogical or about to run out and raise their taxes. I'm pretty sure.
Not been
of
my
that.
experience.
That's right. Absolutely. So I'm very confident that, including our colleague who's not here, we would all agree that they're not a bunch of people that are anxious to raise their taxes. Therefore, I would like to just keep that motion, and we do have a second.
We have a motion and a second, no, just to discuss the
Just
motion.
to respond to your question, I know it's come up a couple different times, there's this concern about the bake sale scenario, and here's what I think happens. We have a combined school and town budget of something like 40 million, of which about 30 million, or 3 out of $4, comes from the local taxpayers, rough numbers. So that other $10 million is based on a bunch of assumptions, basically, that we're going to get for state aid, what we're going to get from traffic tickets, whatever. So the electors of the FTM, they vote an appropriation, how much money you're authorized to spend, and then that's based on assuming about $10 million from other places and then $30 million from the tax. So I'm not so sure, you may want to check with council on whether voting for the appropriation automatically implies that you're voting on the levy. I think that's the separate vote that comes at the end. And I think that the dilemma that you worry about, for when it's the school budget, I'm pretty sure that whatever the FTM votes for the school budget, I think it has to be under 4.5%, but in that window, you have to give it to them unless they agree not to take it. But when it's the town budget, I think that's your charter responsibility and duty that you automatically would reduce the spending. So if the FTM says, we want this much money to go to the schools, you have to give it to them if it's under 4.5%, unless they change their mind and don't want it. If it's the town side, you don't have to spend the money at all, and that's how you resolve the dilemma, the bake sale dilemma. You just don't have to spend everything that you've been permitted to spend. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's the way I see that, maybe resolving the dilemma.
Well, then I think your scenario, the way around it is to cut the spending after the appropriation at the financial town meeting. I find that to be when if the voters at the financial town meeting say, this is what we want to do. I find it hard as a member of this council, having been elected by them same people, to tell them, I'm not going to abide by your wish, I'm going to
That's
take that.
exactly what would have happened if you didn't get your third and fourth quarter estimated revenue from the governor, so.
No, we would have,
Jim was
we would have
scrambling to-
had to reallocate some funds. We
Right.
probably would have spent every bit of an appropriation, but there would have been less of it to go around, so we would have had some major dilemmas. But that's irrelevant to the question about this particular motion.
What's the difference between a motion to approve excess levy and a motion to approve, let's see, what's the difference between a motion to approve and,
I'm saying disapprove it, in other words, take it off, it's done, it's finished, it's not going to exist. Because the request is to approve a standby motion, and if we vote it down, then it doesn't exist, and it's not presented to the financial town meeting as a document.
What I would do is just say, we took no action on it.
Well, that's okay, you can make it a motion.
No, but you have a second, so I won't,
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion to disallow the motion, the motion that's on the floor?
or words to that effect.
Yeah.
we're saying that no matter which way we vote, we're sending a signal. If we vote to kill this, the signal we send is no, that the motion to increase the budget would be approved. If we approve it, then we're telling them, hey, this opportunity is there, take advantage of it. And I don't like either.
How do you feel about take no action?
I really do not see this as influencing anyone in any way, shape, or form. I agree with Mr. Lambert in this case that it's probably, under the circumstances, it's not necessary. Had the budget proposal or recommendation gone over the cap, maybe this motion would be in order because we knew we were going to have to do something. We don't know. We could see a budget pass that's recommended, and we're not going to exceed. So that's, you know.
I think we've moved enough.
I know, I don't see this.
I think we
as being
move the question,
okay,
Mr.
that's
President.
very good. We will move this to question. All those in favor of this, what do you call it? Disapproving of this motion, raise your hand. 3. Against.
I'm going to abstain.
The motion carries.
So we disapprove.
It's been disapproved.
Moving on.
Can I just clarification, just as to why this came up? It's hopefully not. Did the reason for this motion come up because, just for informational purposes, at the financial town meeting, when we have the levy vote and say the body approves an appropriation that would put us over the cap and presumably below whatever limit is set by the lost revenue, is it the solicitor's suggestion that there be some kind of a specific motion that is made before the levy vote? Or can we talk about this at a later date?
Well, we can't, because my thing is, then somebody makes that motion, and it can be a prepared motion or whatever, but it doesn't have to be something that you voted to bring there with you.
I think, unfortunately, Andy is not here. He's been the one that has been deeply involved, and it may be that we will,
Is it enough, I'm asking, is it enough for everyone to know that they're voting on a levy that's in excess of the 4.5? Or do we have to
don't you think?
spell it out in?
Yeah, that's going to be
that's
sort
what I
of
don't-
central to the financial town meeting.
Okay.
I mean, if people don't know that that is a major issue, then I guess we do have issues, but
If the financial town meeting comes out of the meeting with an amount of money that exceeds the level, then it comes back to the council for their vote. Is this council going to vote no when the people have voted yes? It doesn't make sense, and I don't see it getting approved here. I think we got 5 out of 6 votes on this council for for approving it.
Well, let's see what the financial town meeting does.
Before
What the council's vote is.
Moving on to new business, Mr. Plunkett, representative to the East Bay Energy Consortium, requests permission to erect a 150-meter Met Tower at the industrial park to measure wind velocities.
Good evening. As you know, the East Bay Energy Consortium is conducting a feasibility study on a regional wind energy system, and the preliminary screening of all the sites in the East Bay. Tiverton, the Tiverton Industrial Park is one of the candidate sites. If that should ultimately be approved and the town concurs and proceeds with the commitment to erect a system out there, we need ideally a year's worth of wind data. So all this does is get started on collecting that data. It in no way commits the town to build any kind of a system, but if the decision is made, it puts us really far ahead rather than sitting and waiting for a year after the decision is made. So I want to point out that there was a typo that was my typo. It's not 150 meters, it's 50 meters or 150 feet about.
50.
So, yeah.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay, I thought you might be asking that.
The only question I have is, we put a moratorium, I know, on erection of the turbines. Is this impacted by that moratorium, or?
This is not a turbine, this is
No, I understand it, but
a,
I think what we basically.
anemometer,
did is-
essentially.
I don't know,
It's
I
an
understand that, but I thought that when we put this moratorium to allow the planning board to come up with a policy. we have
An
something
ordinance
in our-
which
which is
we're
being,
about to hear.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all I
what's-
want to make sure is there's no conflict with the proposed ordinance to what we're what we're proposing to do here. And I know it's in my packet, and I
Right.
haven't compared the two to make sure, because
I helped write it, so I know what's in it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is, okay, this is not going to have, it is not impacted by that.
No,
Okay.
it's not because the.
Well, I think, I wouldn't want to sit here and tell one person to give me try to write a policy, on wind power, and then someone else sit here and say, well, go ahead and erect this, because if it isn't going to fit to what they want in town, I'm not going to make you waste time and money to put up a 150-meter tower to do your wind study if we're not going to be, or it doesn't appear that we're going to have a policy that's going to allow.
When would this be done, Gary, just to,
Probably within 6 months,
you mean to erect it?
right.
And we're going to be acting on the wind conversion facilities in June 14th.
Okay.
So perhaps this may not be.
Yeah. I don't see a conflict anyway, because.
Okay, I just want to make.
Yeah, I mean, I
that's
know
all,
what's in the
because-
ordinance, the
okay,
draft ordinance.
Okay,
And,
I just want to make sure, because
yeah.
it
And
would
this is
be-
a temporary thing, there's no building, or, it's a
Oh,
guide up,
No, I
put up.
understand. I saw they put one down in Fall River
Yeah,
and had it there for a
right.
period of
And
time.
you take
just
it
to
down
get-
later.
To get the wind.
Exactly.
But my point is, if it's something, if we're gonna, I'm not sure what our ordinance is gonna look like at this point in terms of these generation facilities. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to tell the East Bay Consortium to go ahead and check the wind over here,
Yeah.
and we're going to have a policy that's going to limit.
The ordinance
all.
has got a provision for these Met towers.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that's fine. I just asked
Okay,
him the question.
I'll make a motion that we grant permission
Okay.
to erect a Met Tower at the industrial park, and with the request that you keep us informed of the placement and time of the, when it will be done.
fine. By the way, just on a related issue, there will be a brief report on the East Bay Energy Consortium's proceedings. You'll probably have that within a couple of weeks. I've been working on that myself.
Are they proceeding with their talks with the two water departments on?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
absolutely. And I will do this in coordination with Gareth and make sure there's some documentation on it that he concurs with and so on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion,
On
is
your
there?
motion first, could we just make sure that it's with the correction that it's only a 50-meter tower? That's a typo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only a 50-meter tower, not a 150-meter tower.
Has
So
the
that would
motion
be
been
about
seconded?
450 feet.
Yeah, you don't have it.
We don't have a second yet. Is there
I'll
a
second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to allow for the permission to erect a Met Tower.
I have
in
a
the
question,
industrial
Mr.
park.
President.
Yes.
And Gary, did you say that the consortium is already, has the locations, a list of the locations and so in existence?
They've had a preliminary screening of possible sites that could possibly be used in terms of area and connectability to the grid. That's as far as they've gone. There's been no selection or, there's a rough categorization of the best sites and the next best sites and so on. And the industrial park is within those lists, so that's probably all we need to say.
Well, my thought is, I feel like I'm voting with a lack of information. For example, I've heard them discuss the landfill site as a good place for conducting a wind survey and so forth. I'm just wondering, we shouldn't wait for the report that you just alluded to before we act on the motion.
I know what's in the report too, and it's not going to list the sites. It's going to tell you what's gone, what's been concluded, what the process has been. And until they really finalize the data and collect some more information, it'd be premature to list all the sites. But I can tell you, because we want to start collecting wind information, part of the final screening will be the wind data that we collect. In other words, if our wind data shows less than what the information that's available now, which is kind of a coarse wind map for the entire state. The other thing is, in order to get, if we should go ahead with this, in order to get financial backing, the investors, bonders, however this is ultimately financed, they really want a year's worth of data to certify that. So this is something that's not going to cost the town anything. It doesn't commit the town in any way. It just helps the consortium make an intelligent decision.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Economic Development Commission, brief informational PowerPoint presentation.
If my computer wakes up, we'll be in good shape. What I was hoping to do, Len Schmidt, by the way, from the Economic Development Commission, what I was hoping to do is just provide information regarding our plan, the Economic Development Commission's planned meeting to be held May 27th, 5 p.m. at the new location of the Family Ties Restaurant. The intent here is to inform the public, but to also get a lot of information from the public and to provide a lot of information to the public. And the theme that we are working under as we move forward, and this is a product of quite a bit of discussion, is to publicize Tiverton as a town that is open for business. Now, it's not open for business for any kind of business, of course. There's some constraints. This is the agenda, which basically will consist of an introduction, discussion of our mission. We're going to introduce our website and some other promotional activities, including a brochure, and provide information about activities that are going on around the town. And the public participation that we're asking for is ideas and opinion. We have a questionnaire, and we're also always looking for membership and talent. And we will have a keynote speaker, Keith Stokes. The presentation that he will give will relate to opportunities or prospects for Tiverton and the surrounding area that we may be interested in. And of course, some time to be spent in networking and listening. Just really quickly, the mission statement is as outlined in the town website and other documentation. Essentially, the elements of that mission are to plan for and promote business and economic development, increase the Tiverton tax base and employment, mindful of the comprehensive plan, liaison with Rhode Island towns, county, and state agencies for the purpose of garnering resources and the benefits of those associations, and assist businesses in getting started with access to the town, incentives, expansion, relocation, so forth. I'd like to take a minute, well, I'll go through this entirely and then I'll come back to the EDC website. Recent and ongoing activities. Just as an example, we've got a new business over on Fish Road. It's been there about 3/4 of a year, the Life Raft Survival Equipment Company. Bank of American branch is closed here. CVS is relocated, and Family Ties has moved, or is moving tomorrow. We've got a proposal on the table for the Tiverton Village with the properties on Fish Road, which at this point is pending the developer's action. There is a power plant expansion on the table, and we're in the process of working with the Chamber of Commerce and in getting a federal grant. And this is done primarily through the town offices here, but we've been involved in that, and it's a worthy endeavor to lay the groundwork for commercializing that property. And then you just heard a discussion about wind and solar energy. Well, wind energy and solar energy is also on the table with some interest. And Four Corners, very active group down there that are interested in developing their infrastructure and looking for funding. And there are some prospects, again, working with the RIEDC and the Chamber of Commerce. And we have recently initiated a new tax stabilization policy, which has to do with benefits of that can be passed to new entrepreneurs. I mentioned the public participation, and essentially we're looking for the dialogue. We're looking for the town to be aware that we're open and interested to hearing input and getting information. And we're going to be putting this questionnaire on our website, hoping to gather it in that fashion, but also hard copy at this meeting, among other things. Let's see, I think I'm through with this. This is a snapshot of our website. I can figure out how to get that bigger. Undaunted by failure here, I'm going to go this way. What we've got here is basically a live website that's going to be showing pictures and different elements of the town. The intent here is to make it an interesting website and and make it a useful website. For example, looking at the membership of the Economic Development Commission, there are actually 5 people right now working with the commission, one of which is really a part-time. He's fully appointed, but he's not available all the time, and we are looking for additional help so that we can reshuffle things a little bit. See, business incentives. If you look at our business incentives in Tiverton, just as an example, this is a tax exemption incentive program, enterprise zone tax exemption. We've got a display here of the approval process that's been laid out for the Tiverton Village and Land Development Guide and the Comprehensive Community Plan, for example, are there. And then we also have some Rhode Island information here as well. Some of these are not active, so I'm trying to pick only the ones that are alive and well. And this, by the way, will be up by the 27th. It's not fully up right now, and it'll be available to the public. This, for example, if you're looking for advertising, here's a group of advertisers that we have listed here. Again, this is a straw group. It's not a complete list, but it's part of the process of getting started. And for example, if you're looking for a contractor, and so forth. We expect to have a lot of good links on here, and this effort has gone on for some time now. Scott Humphrey is leading that with John Flanders, and again, this is being funded by the Newport County Chamber of Commerce. Any questions?
Is this going to be a one-time event, this meeting that you're planning for the getting of information and so forth?
It's a one-time event as far as we're looking ahead right now. It depends on whether it makes sense to do something in the future, but I wouldn't institutionalize it as an annual event or something like that. I'd call it an ad hoc event.
Well, the reason I asked the question is I'm in favor of doing anything to help that new restaurant, or the moving restaurant, become a success. Except how many people can you get into that building? How big a crowd are you expecting?
It will accommodate over 100 people. We're hopeful we can get that many. And by the way, it's open to the public. We'd love to have a good mix of entrepreneurs as well as and business people, as well as interested parties and people who are interested in our town.
In your list of businesses,
Yes.
I didn't see the name Stafford Design, and they are a new business on Main Road.
Well, that's not a complete list.
Okay.
This
Very
is-
attractive.
Yeah.
They
No,
took that auto store.
And we're going to leave something out, I'm sure.
Yep, but it was, I thought, that's a great.
There's a new cycle shop in town, too.
Yes, yeah. So-
But the point of all of that is, there's a lot going on, pluses and minuses.
Yep.
And people don't realize that someone moves business into North Main Street a while back, and he was telling me how excited he was to be here from Fall River and have his business in Tiverton. And that was, that's good news, because we hear a lot about the non-competitive taxes and everything
Oh,
else
I
that
know.
rolls up to be issues. Anything
Good
else?
job.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Epke, Municipal Building Committee.
You have two items. You have a memo that the committee put together and a survey that we're hoping to get your permission to send out with the tax bills. And the memo was simply to make sure that the committee and the council are on the same page in terms of the role that financing plays in a recommendation. That in our thinking is that financing is rather critical to making a recommendation feasible or not feasible. And we wanted to make sure we're on the same page with that.
Would you please repeat what you just said? I'm sorry, I was distracted. Not from good evening, ma'am, but just that main point.
The point is to make sure that the council and the committee are on the same page in terms of financing, that the committee
Financing what?
financing recommendations, that a recommendation is not feasible unless the financing for that recommendation is also included in the recommendation, that the two are entwined.
Could you give me an example?
If I may?
Sure.
Okay, again, I won't speak for myself.
You're going to get
That-
answer my question, Edward,
But
please.
I think I'm going to help answer
Okay.
your question for you. I think what Ms. Epke is trying to understand or get from the council, that should they make a recommendation regarding some properties, you know, whether it's for sale or to keep or whatever, that it has to be financially feasible to do it. So that, for argument's sake, if we said we wanted to sell one of the buildings, well, I'm sure we can sell every building in town like that at a price. But is it financially feasible to sell it at whatever? Or is it financially feasible to keep it and have the town take the burden to pay for insurance and so forth and so on?
I think
So-
it goes beyond that. I think what Ms. Epke's looking for is if they say the Ranger School should be used as a municipal center, but would take $500,000 to renovate it.
And we'll go out to get a bond to do it. It's not a particularly feasible recommendation.
Well, but the point of the matter is, I'm not sure, and I think that's where the council needs to have the discussion about whether or not it was to get an idea of what we should be doing with the buildings, then look if we feel that it's feasible to continue with that, or not to go along with that recommendation. But I see like a recommendation to consolidate two buildings we currently have and renovate the third building to accommodate that. And here's what the cost is gonna be, and this is our recommendation. That's what you're saying. Are we allowing you some flexibility in what it would take to accomplish the recommendation? I don't know if that answers your question, Don. but-
Yeah, if that's
It
the
does.
case,
Because in our minds, part of the recommendation, part of framing a recommendation is doing a cost-benefit analysis.
that would be great, but I would just say present it and let the council vote on it. Or are you looking for something, some kind of approval in advance?
No, I think what we're,
Just guidance.
It's just a recommendation.
Yes.
And I think, Hannibal, if you look at the memo, the beginning of the second paragraph, I've been going to the meetings, and I actually made the argument that under the delegation that we provided in our motion establishing this subcommittee, that they've already got authority to do that. I think this came up, I think that the discussion that preceded this memo and this recommendation was, we were discussing how about consolidating? And,
Well,
you know, how
it
much
did.
would that cost? Is it
well,
more
that was
than
part of it, but it was also kicked off by the resolution that the council voted to put on for the financial town meeting that didn't include any direction as to how to use the proceeds. And that initiated a discussion within our committee of, well, is that a part of what we want to be dealing with? And we came to the conclusion that whether it's the proceeds from a sale of a building, of course, everybody wants to get their hands on those proceeds, or whether it be some kind of innovative financing with a developer, or a combination of grants, you know, perhaps there's an educational group that's interested in one of the buildings, we can leverage that, that all of those things come wrapped in a package with a recommendation. And if that's something that you want us to do, that's what we're interested in doing. If you want us to be looking at what the current uses are and what the documentation for future uses are and what the square footage is, we'll do that.
I think the idea of going before the financial town meeting for the ability to be able to sell the parcels was only, if we wait for a recommendation and it comes after the financial town meeting, we have to wait a whole year before, if the recommendation was to dispose of a piece of property. We have to wait a whole year now, because we have to take that to a financial town meeting, you know, prior to doing that. The idea of presenting to the financial town meeting a proposition that would allow us the sale of a piece of property, should the committee come back and make a recommendation, was only so that we wouldn't have to wait. If you come back to us in June and say, here's our recommendation, we should sell the Ranger School, we should sell the Nonquit School, you know, we don't see anything that's going to be used or to be a benefit without investing a ton of money into this, we have to wait then till the next financial town meeting to get approval to sell a piece of property. And I think that was the only reason. It was trying to get a heads up and just,
I'm not arguing the pros and cons of the resolution, and I agree, it was to allow the council to take
Yeah.
advantage of an opportunity, should it arise, before the next possible date to vote on whatever. But as a result of that resolution, it prompted a further discussion with our committee to the point where we weren't sure if we were on the same page as the council, and that was the impetus for the memo.
Well, you know, my own feeling is, the more information you give us, or a council sitting here, the better off the council is to sift through what our procedure are. If that includes financing options, and the other issue is what's your recommendations with regard to the use of the proceeds? So be it. I mean, I would think that's within your purview. It will help us. We may have other ideas, but hey, give it to us. I mean, give us the information that you have.
If I can just add something. I don't think that any analysis would be complete without the financial aspects. I think that, they cannot make an educated recommendation without knowing, is there money available? Is there enough money available? Is it going to cost the town money to accept our recommendation? Or is there going to be excess proceeds? So I think that it's, in order to complete their recommendations, it has to be all-encompassing,
Yeah,
and it has to have financial data in it.
I agree. I would agree.
I'm just wondering if the committee has had an appraisal done on the properties. Do we know the value on those properties?
yes, we did have appraisals
council-
done on both, on Nonquit and Ranger.
All right, the only other point I want to make is we're 6 months away from heating season again. We're going to be spending money to heat those buildings. Let's sell them.
Okay, Joe.
Okay.
We've heard that.
And then move, so there's consensus on that, or should we
Yeah.
move on?
Well, I'll be glad to make a motion that the recommendation include financing options and options with regard to the, any recommendations with regard to the proceeds to be engendered from the, yeah, a sale or several sales.
I would
Second
second
motion.
that. I would, Mr. President, I would mention that depending on the timing, say that the resolution the council put to the financial town meeting was voted down, and then in June, the committee had a report, we would still have the option of putting the question on the November general election ballot, which we can do under the charter.
Don't get your hopes up about June.
No,
Just an
but I
example.
think it's just understanding, the reasoning behind prior to a report.
Right.
Is that, your hands are tied for that whole year if you don't have that motion, or, allowed to sell, should that be the recommendation? And that's what it's, but, I have to agree with Jim that financing statements have to go with anything, because a recommendation may die because it's, the financing involved to do it may be beyond what someone wishes, a group wishes to do.
Or have the ability.
Or have the ability to do.
Or it's just unrealistic.
I would
Just
amend-
said, to sell a piece to renovate another piece, not to get rid of something else, it's hard, without something before us. I think you just need to know the direction you need to go in. And I
Correct.
think that it should include those, because your recommendation, has to be sustainable.
I think it's important that the recommendations get to the council as soon as you've got them gelling. And I would amend the motion that was made to say that you would provide all this information if it were available. I would not want to see you hold back a recommendation because you don't have the financial material that you had hoped to have. You could present that at a later time or whatever. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and Ms. Duffy's motion was to,
Confirm that their recommendations should include financing options as well as recommendations with regard to the use of proceeds.
We have that motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
And just briefly, I mentioned the survey. We put together, it's a very short survey. And as Mr. Lambert mentioned, we have been talking about the possibility, the feasibility of consolidating. And there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. And one big piece is getting public input on whether or not people would be thinking that might be a feasible idea. Would they be willing to travel to a different place? And so forth. So we put together a very short survey that asks people's opinions. Is consolidation a good idea? And then some general ideas, soliciting input on the various properties, and then whether or not people would be interested in participating in a group facilitated discussion. And we were hoping to send these surveys out with the tax bills at Mrs. Mello's suggestion.
I'm sorry, I did speak with the tax collector, and yes, when I was tax collector, we used to send inserts free of charge, but they're not free of charge anymore.
Oh.
So you might want to reconsider that part.
Oh.
And it's looking like it's 4 cents a,
4 cents a,
well, she was emailing them and getting better information. She hasn't got back to me yet, but I'll let you know.
well, if it's
We have-
4
we have
cents
some
a
numbers. We
piece,
have some
then no.
numbers. Hang on, we're gonna get an update on that.
Oh, great.
I did contact the company that prepares the tax bills, and if the insert is provided by you and delivered to them, there would be no fee to include it with the tax bill, so long as it didn't exceed the weight requirement. We already have plans for the tax bill and the insert, that's the tax collection reminder of the lockbox and the hours. So if it was a single sheet, ready to go, there would be no fee to include it in the tax bills, if a council-approved insert.
Okay.
Would you have a copy of?
Well, I suppose we could take up a small collection to go up to Staples and make, what, 6,000 copies?
No, is your request a single sheet?
Yeah, it is a single sheet.
Do we get to see it?
Sure, if you want to.
Yes.
I wasn't going to burden you with it, but if you want to, go ahead.
Well, if you wish our approval, it would be nice to see it.
There's a couple, it's good to know that they're still getting it
What do you think?
I'm thinking I don't want to look at the survey.
Just show it. I just want to make sure it's appropriate.
I don't swear on it or something.
Race created natural.
A full page, where did the tax collector go? Big one?
The format, right, the format may be different. The questions will be the same.
Obviously,
What
this
is gonna-
side of the council only gets one copy.
What he's going to put in the envelope, will this add?
I
to-
think you can mail up to 4 sheets with a postage. So if we have the tax bill, the tax collection insert, and that insert should be okay. But I wouldn't recommend any more than that.
Thank you. You got quite a handle here. The Tiverton Municipal Building Visibility Advisory Committee.
I know.
Can't you get one more word to stick in
No,
there?
I can't, and I didn't come up with the title.
No, I'm not blaming you.
Okay, folks, what's your pleasure?
I would make a motion that we approve the inclusion of the survey from the building committee to go out with the tax bill.
May I ask just one quick question?
Yes.
Or is this to be used as guidance as opposed to any leverage? Because obviously it wouldn't be like a scientific or...
Oh,
proven.
absolutely
One
not.
person
No,
would
no,
just
no,
send
no.
in many, many copies if they had a
No.
very strong opinion.
No, it's
So
just input.
just guidance. Thank
It's
you.
soliciting ideas, gauging interest, that kind of thing. Thanks.
We have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
No, I think Cecil made the motion.
Oh, good.
For a second.
Okay, if I
Okay,
may,
it's been seconded,
if I
yes.
may try to amend Mr. Cecil's motion to see if the council would be willing to, out of its contingency, offer some funds to pay for the printing of these.
Spendthrift?
Throwing money around, Mr.
Yeah.
Roberts, again?
Well, I'm saying, we've charged a committee to do something and giving them no funds to do their job.
Right.
So I'm saying.
Well, I'll make a motion.
I was thinking
Sounds
maybe the
reasonable to
town
me. How much
clerk's
can that- how
copying
much-
machine?
Well, I'm sure I can put it into printing maybe at the dockets or something, just ask for a couple of extra copies.
You might want to check
I'll
with
work it out.
the printer as
Good.
well as with the copier,
Nancy's going to work it out and let the minutes so reflect.
Yeah. We have a motion and a second to approve the sending of the survey with the tax bills. Further discussion?
We really are careful with our own money, I noticed that.
By the end of this fiscal year, you may
We'll
need
need
every
it.
cent that's.
We'll need it, don't worry. The day is coming.
Motion made and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, Town Administrator requests council approval for extension of department head contracts with no cost impact to June 2011.
We have 5 department head employees' contract which have expired, and this is to extend their contracts to June 30, 2011, and would have no cost impact. Essentially, there are 3 items that are changing. One of them is the term, which would be extending the term. What we're doing is we're looking at the salary, because some of these contracts have, if we give them a performance review, we're obligated to give them a salary increase. And we have no salary increases have had any salary increases in the past 2 years. And this would enable us to extend the contract, give them a performance review, okay, without being obligated to either rate them unsatisfactory, so that we wouldn't have to give them a salary increase. And those are the 3 items. It's the term of the contract, the salary remaining the same, and the job evaluation.
Jim Odell, Warren Avenue. My question is only, it says no costing impact to June 11. Does that mean there's no cost, there's no salary increase, no benefit cost increase, nothing built in?
There is nothing built in, but we reserve the right to, in fact, give them a salary increase and a new contract, if it's feasible, and if the money is available. They've already gone 2 years without a contract, without, a salary increase.
No, understood.
It may be a 3rd year as well, but.
Okay.
My problem, Jim, is you refer to this as an extension of employment contract, and you changed 3 items in a contract, which doesn't mean it's an extension, it's a negotiation.
I would say it was negotiated. It indicates that it's an agreement. Are the department heads objecting to this anyway? Have they seen this?
They've seen it, they've signed it.
They've seen it and signed it.
But I think your point is well taken, Mr. President, that it's not an extension because the contract is not the exact. So it's actually a negotiated new contract until June 30th, 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, the word extension is the only problem. I don't see any problem with it. So, I would make a motion that the words extension of be deleted and that the contracts as written here be ratified.
Campbell, is that a motion you just made?
Yes.
Sorry, would you repeat it, please?
Yeah, and my motion is to remove the words extension of so that it becomes an employment contract, and that the result be ratified.
Which should come out, but it does protect us at any financial meeting. I know.
Is that a meeting within a meeting, may I ask?
Well,
No.
I think I just, I have some problems with calling it an extension, to take the word extension out of it and just call it an employment contract. It's a negotiation of an agreement, and the reasons for it is this job evaluation clause. I think we would probably be better off having an amendment to a contract that took a clause out, and I would feel more comfortable voting on an amendment to a contract that took a provision out that was not favorable to the town, meaning, automatic raise upon that. So I'm finding it that I have trouble voting on it as an extension, and I have trouble voting on it just saying it's an employment contract, because either way, it's, I see this as something that's been negotiated, and it should be presented as, a new contract, because there are changes to it, or presented as amendments to an older agreement.
If the consensus is to, change the word extension of to amendment to, I think that the employees would certainly go along with that.
Again, my opinion is that if we even are talking about an amendment two, we still have to come up with a new contract. Because if we're amending an existing and we're saying that we haven't extended the old one, so technically it's not an existing contract.
What I think I hear people saying is that we should have a new contract.
If I may, Hannibal, I know you've made your motion,
No, I'll
but
withdraw it.
if I can
I'll
make,
withdraw the
if I can make a motion that we table this until we can have the town solicitor look at the wording to make sure, because I have an issue that if it's not an extension, and how can you amend a contract that you don't have yet?
I understand.
Could you just
The
call
town-
it an extension with amendments?
The town solicitor has,
We're changing, a contract that is not no longer.
Right, that's what I'm saying, extension with amendments.
the town solicitor has reviewed this. And if we were to go to a new contract, then we'd have to go to the model contract, which would change things all around.
We change the model contract, I guess.
It would make significant changes in contracts, going to the model contract.
That's it.
I have a motion with no second.
Right, you do, and that's, right
Okay.
now.
Let's, if we did call it an amendment to the contract, and at least a reference is made to an existing contract, which is incorporated by reference, and all terms and conditions of the contract shall remain the same, except, and then, I guess the solicitor has, and Jim have worked out the exception. So, it is not uncommon to have an amendment to a contract, as long as you know that the contract isn't, you're amending that contract, and that's what you're working from.
We're talking about a contract, though, that has expired, are we not?
That becomes the issue, right? Because now,
That's what I'm saying, how can you amend or extend a contract that is not in?
Well, I think it is. You have the motion.
I mean, is there something in the contract that speaks to, I don't have the contract in front of me, so is there something in the contract that speaks to, at the end, if within so many days, months, or whatever, if no action is taken, it's considered to be in full force? I mean,
there are extension provisions, I believe, in the contracts, and I'm not sure if they're all the same, or if they differ.
have
we have-
contracts in the past.
Counselor Roderick, didn't we also distribute copies of the original
Yeah, we did, you did.
You did.
They're in there.
In there.
They're in the, in our packet.
No, they're not.
Past
Not mine. Oh, yes,
It's
they
in
are.
mine.
Sorry. At the very end. They were in order. How could I think that Mrs. Mello would not have everything in there?
I would make a motion that this entire matter be continued to the next meeting and be placed under the executive session part of the meeting, so we can battle around the legalities. I wouldn't mind doing that, because I plan on being a lawyer before this term ends.
In writing.
Seconded.
I don't think we can do that.
Why? Why not?
Because it's not collective bargaining. They're individual contracts, and then it doesn't fall under the provision for the closed session.
I disagree. I think that it has everything to do with negotiations, labor management agreement. I think it would be appropriate to consider this an executive session.
I think we've
The
gotten a ruling.
exception is for collective bargaining.
Isn't that what isn't that what we've been
they're
doing?
not part of a group.
They're not part of a group, they're individuals, and therefore, the word collective. Huh, this is the ruling we've done in the past now. We have a motion to continue. Is there a second?
Is that Mr. Roderick's motion you're
No.
talking about, to continue to have the solicitor review?
I believe that Hannibal just made that motion. Or you
Okay.
had made that motion.
Yeah,
Do you want to
yeah.
second that motion, Hannibal, to continue?
Do I want one?
No, the motion was made by Mr. Roderick to continue. You offering a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Now we can have discussion.
If I may, just eyeballing very quickly, each one of these contracts has a provision that, with, it has to be in writing. And unless that's been done, I mean, in essence, these contracts are just sitting out there in limbo. So I think that's something that we need to finalize, what our intent is. Because right now, we're, again, either amending or extending something that is not in effect, in my opinion.
I think that the council could could extend and amend the contract at the same time.
Okay, but if you look at the contract, wouldn't we, the provision that says we must, consider employer, blah, 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 the last 6 months, and then not later than 30 days prior to the end of the last year of the employee's employment contract, shall notify the employee in writing whether the employer elects to renew or not renew the employment contract or offer employee a new employment contract. And that is the last paragraph in every contract.
We have a motion and a second to continue. The discussion can continue with how we proceed with that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Yeah, I vote.
Unanimous. Motion continued to the next meeting. No time to look at those or review that information.
Could you check and see if we didn't discuss the 10 contracts in executive session in the past?
Bids and requests for proposals. Recreation Commission request approval to award bid for fencing on Boogamarsh Road Playground. Recommended Costco Incorporated of Woonsocket, Rhode Island for $5,900.
I'll make a motion that the bid be awarded to Costco in the amount of $5,900.
Seconded.
And I would ask one question, where is the $5,900 going to come from? Because
I knew somebody was going to
I don't
ask
see
that.
a source of funding in the
I
documentation.
knew someone was going to ask that. We are awaiting reimbursement from DEM for $34,000, or a substantial amount of money. It should be the whole $34,000 for work that's been performed at the Bugamash Recreation Area.
Work in kind, correct?
Part of it is.
Okay, so part of a state grant.
The whole recreation park is part of the state grant.
Okay, then should the motion include, that the awarding of the contract subject to the receiving of the funds from?
Certainly, that's our intent. We can modify it to that.
I will amend my motion to include that language, that is subject to the receipt of grant monies from Department of Environmental Management.
And just to be clear, I'd re-second it, or whoever seconded it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second now to approve the awarding of the bid for $5,900, subject to the funds being received from the grant funds.
A question, maybe for the solicitor. I know that there were two bidders. Costco for $5,900, which is a company that comes from Woonsocket, and a second bid, which comes from a local engineering firm, but which bid is $350 more. We're talking about $5,000 or $6,000. Should we give any thought, and maybe in the future, not necessarily tonight, but shouldn't we favor local business whenever we can? And for $300, couldn't the local guy have done the job? I don't know, is that illegal to award a bid to something higher than the lowest bidder without a reason, except that he's a local contractor?
It says it seems to be in the best interest of
There is some discretion. I mean, the lowest price is not the only factor, and there is, even in the advertisement, that the town reserves the right to reject any or all bids as it deems to be in the best interest of the town. So it's within the, discretion of the town council to discuss other factors that might come into play that would be in the best interest of the town. It's not just the lowest price. That is a big factor.
Something we
but-
can think about for the future.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion, seeing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Recreation Commission request approval to award bid for coating and striping Bugamash Recreation Basketball Court.
This was the only bid that we received, and it meets the qualifications.
Which is, I didn't get it.
It was handed out this evening.
Oh,
Yeah, it was handed out this evening because the bids were opened on Friday afternoon.
Mr. President.
It's from Frank Flyings Incorporated, Manville, Rhode Island, and it's in the amount of $10,875.
And this was the only bid received?
Correct.
Okay.
Do we have a recommendation from the Recreation Commission on this?
This would be it. It's
What
Oh, Bob Martin.
What's the coating they're putting on here?
Gold.
How much striping are they doing?
the striping, two courts, two basketball courts.
And it costs $10,875 to do?
Well, it's a coating, and I'm not an expert on coating, but it's a coating that won't wear very easily and can't be messed with.
I like things that can't be messed with.
Surface of the basketball court, without striping it?
I'm not sure if they're painting inside the border or not, to be perfectly honest. I don't have the,
Probably more than one, yeah.
Is there anyone here from?
I can say something. The basketball courts are 100 by 100, and they're going to be coating the entire surface like a green or red, I'm not sure what color, and then putting all the lines in, the power cords,
Three-point line on it.
three-point line, center line, all the lines. So it'll be an official basketball court. That will hold up, because the surface they put down is semi-wear resistant. You won't slip if it's a little wet. I mean, if it's pouring, it'll be slippery, but it's just common. You probably see it in a million basketball courts or tennis courts all around. Very similar.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we award the bid to Frankie Kleins for the painting and striping of the basketball courts in the amount of...
Subject to.
Yes, let me just finish. In the amount of $10,875, and again, incorporating subject to the receipt of the grant from DEM.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded, discussion, seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Parkland Beach Oversight Committee requests approval to award bid for Parkland Beach Survey Mapping Project to Civil Engineering Concepts of Little Compton for $14,950.
There were essentially two bids received, one for $17,519, that only addressed 4 of the 5 phases in the solicitation. And then there were Civil Engineering Concepts who met all 5 conditions and was the lowest price. So our recommendation is to award it to Civil Engineering Concepts.
And how much money is in that account for that survey mapping project?
$15,000.
Okay, that's fine.
Interesting.
Works for me.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we award the mapping and surveying project for Bogland Oversight Committee in the amount of $14,950 to include all phases of the services advertised.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Town Administrator, announcements, comments, and questions.
Very brief this evening, only 2. Tax collections for the 2009 tax bill. We've mailed out 924 delinquent notices with a value of $1,278,728. That's for real estate, motor vehicle, and tangible taxes that arose. The next item is we received a letter from the Rhode Island Board of Health thanking us and our EMA crews, including volunteers, for a job well done, in addition to vaccinating or giving the H1N1 shots to all of the school pupils. We also vaccinated 494 adults. So they thought that that was very good, and our meds plan was executed, and everything went well. So I'd like to thank all involved, the EMA crew headed by our fire chief, with his assistant, and all of the volunteers that helped with all the inoculations. Thank you.
Council announcements and comments. Councilor Lambert.
I filed an agenda item, quote, "If appropriate legislation has been enacted," and the purpose was just to preserve the right to cancel and reschedule the financial town meeting. We obviously don't have the appropriate legislation, so there's really no purpose to even consider the item.
It's nice to keep trying.
I didn't have an opportunity to before to ask my question. This is about the notice of proposed tax rate change.
Okay.
This is an official form. This form is called, Town of Tiverton, Rhode Island, Notice of Proposed Tax Rate Change. This is calling for a proposed tax increase of 9%. This has been filed with the state. My question to the town council is, are you aware of this document? Did you approve this document? Your name is on it, Mr. Boland.
My signature on it? I signed.
No, your signature is not on it, but it has in fact been filed with the state.
I signed a notice that's similar to the document you have in your hand. I signed one.
On 4/6.
Yes.
So that is my second question. The state is now looking at two different documents, one for a 4.3% increase, and another one for a 9.04% increase.
There are any other documents, I understand that the council took a vote to send some information to the state or ask for an advisory opinion, and so instructed Mr. Gonzalo to ask for that advisory opinion. The documents that he sent, I don't think the members of the council have seen.
So an official form with the following statement: the above property tax estimates have been computed in a manner approved by the Rhode Island State of Revenue. So these numbers have been inputted into this official form and submitted to the state without approval and knowledge of the town council. Is that right?
No, I say, the town council instructed the administrator to ask for an advisory on what we could possibly exceed the cap based on the revenue numbers that we were getting or anticipated the loss of revenue. The document that he submitted was the document he submitted. I will refer to him so he can try to answer your question.
If I may. The April 6th document that you have, my first comment is that you're taking documents out of context. Now,
I'm taking...
yes, let me explain.
Listen
Is
to
this an
the
official form?
explanation. will
Let
you?
me explain.
Okay.
There was a letter that was that covered that document, the 4/6 one.
Got it.
Okay. And there were sheets, there were two other sheets, worksheets behind that
That too.
document.
Got it.
They were all labeled request for. And if you would just read the title of the first one, dated 4/6, that has Mr. Boland's signature.
Note, Town of Tiverton, Rhode Island, notice of proposed tax rate change.
Okay.
They're
Now,
both exactly the same.
Now, the two sheets that followed that sheet, do you have those?
Correct?
Do you?
Oh, yes.
Could you read the title on the first or the third sheet and fourth sheet of the April 6th document?
Well, that's not pertaining to my question.
Well, you're taking things out of context, and I'm trying to explain the
I don't think
difference to
I
you.
am.
I'm trying to explain the difference to you. Okay, can you read the title so that everybody can take advantage of it? Can you read the title at the top of the third and fourth sheet attached to the April 6th
I
document?
apologize, Mr. Gonzalo, but I'm not really getting an answer to my question.
I'm trying to give it to you.
I
I'm
don't
trying
think you
to,
are.
I'm
This whole
trying to
discussion was on what
illustrate.
was not on the agenda.
I'm trying to illustrate to you the difference between them. Because if you look at the second one that does not have Mr. Boland's signature and has 4 sheets of paper, the first sheet indicates twice that it's just an inquiry for eligibility. The second sheet is exactly the same. And the third and fourth sheets, the word request is eliminated, and what's put in its place is eligibility. The first set of documents, dated April the 6th, are the official documents. Those are the documents that have been published. That's the official document. The second set of documents are the documents that the Department of Revenue requires in order to make an evaluation.
Well,
So you can't take them out of context
I think...
and say that the second one is what we're going by. And you know as well as I do that the second set of documents is just an inquiry.
It doesn't say that. This is an official
You're taking it
form.
out of context again. You're taking one sheet of paper out of a package of 4.
Is this or is this not an official form that's used to inform the state of proposed tax rate?
It is that type of form,
It
yes.
is.
Which is a form that they need to make an evaluation.
So you're requesting an evaluation for a proposed tax rate of 9%?
Yes, that's what it amounts to. We're not,
Without the town
let me,
council's
let me,
signature or without their approval?
Hold on. Can I just interject to something? I think Mr. Gonzalo is correct, that you are taking and making one sheet of paper. We asked for, as you know, the information that the taxpayers are entitled to at the financial town meeting. I hope it's not your position that they are not entitled to know what are the parameters if they do exceed the tax.
Well, here is exactly my position. I get lots of questions as president of TCC. When people ask me, what is the town council asking for, I have to answer this. There's 2 exact forms that have been filed with the state. One calls for staying under the state cap, and the other one calls for 9%. One of them has been approved by the town council, one of them has not. And that is the truth. That's a statement of fact. And whether or not it's within the context of some checklist that was part of this package, I think, is a separate question altogether.
I think you are a master at taking things out of context and showing one sheet. That sheet, there was a cover letter to that sheet. And perhaps you should read the cover letter to the sheet.
I have the cover letter, and
Okay.
on the cover letter, it says, as a matter of fact, there are
You
2
have a copy
statements
of
here
it?
I'd like to bring our attention to. In the email itself, it says, please find documentation regarding the town of Tiverton's request for eligibility for voters of the financial town meeting to take a vote to exceed the tax cap. That was in the email. Now, in this cover letter, what are we seeing? Please find the proposed tax rate change to assist your analysis in reviewing our position.
Can I see that letter? Because I would like to read some other
It
sentences.
also says, this is not a request for a waiver.
Oh.
It says that in the cover letter. However, that's not referred to anywhere in this document.
The cover letter is the determining document.
The cover letter is not an official form.
The form that you are waiving to all the taxpayers was attached to the cover letter. The Department of Revenue is saying to the town, look, give us the parameters of what you're talking about. May I have the cover letter? Because I would like to read what Mr. Gonzalo did put in the cover letter. Okay? Our request is simply to ask the Department of Municipal Affairs, should the need arise at our financial town meeting, what might be an amount authorized over the tax cap? Please allow me to repeat that this is not a request for a waiver, but merely a request to determine the amount that the town would be eligible for if it were to exceed the tax cap at the financial town meeting. Thank you for your cooperation. Is that clear?
What is the date? I don't even have that letter. What's the date?
April 19th, it was after our meeting. No, I'm sorry. This is,
If I may, Justin Katz, Arbor Terrace. That is all accurate, Councilor Durfee, but it's not really to the point. This cover letter specifically says, please find the notice of proposed tax rate change. It does not say a modified version that the town council prefers, and the town council did not review that notice, did not approve it, and it went to the state. At the very least, it is fostering confusion, and I'm very surprised that there's not some disapproval on the council over that fact.
If I can express my concern, you know, when we discussed this the first time around, I indicated one of the problems with using these forms was going to be, and I can read the top of the form. It says checklist for request to exceed property tax cap. And in response to very, very specific questions, here are our responses. Amount by which proposed tax levy exceeds 4.5% cap, $1,461,644. The total override requested, $1,461,644. I guess what I'm suggesting is, look, we can go back and forth, but the fact is, we used forms that are typically used in a request to exceed a property tax. And no matter how much we argue about it, we can look at the wording on this form, and somebody will come away with the impression, perhaps more than an impression, we're actually requesting this override. As a matter of fact, on page 2, we specifically request the override in the amount of $1,461,644. I guess it's, as long as the voters understand that we do have an issue here, and there obviously has to be confusion when you're trying to use a form that wasn't appropriate for the situation. We can keep reading it back and forth, and it'll make Ms. Durfee's point, it'll make the speaker's point. The fact is, we now have these documents on record, and at first blush, without explanation, it would appear to be, for example, if I look at the form that says notice of proposed tax rate change, I can read that whole document, and there really is nothing to suggest, oh, we're just checking on eligibility. We're just checking for informational purposes.
That's if you separate all the documents, and I agree. If I send you a cover letter that says, here's the information, and you put it on a sheet that they like to see because that's the one they work from, but you say to them, this is not asking you for this is asking for an evaluation, and it's after we told the administrator to seek the evaluation. Now, if he didn't put it on the right form or a form that confused somebody,
And if they didn't, they will
but
come
I'm
back
just saying,
to us, I'm
we
sure.
shouldn't have, we should have told him how he should have done it then, because what we did as a council was took a vote that said, please ask for this information. And we didn't tell him what form to send it on, we asked him to send the information. And I'm not gonna chastise him because he put it on that form. It's
and I'm not.
misleading because we did send a form, and I signed a form that had all of the numbers at the budget committee that we had to have published by a certain date, and I came in here and signed that document.
Does it say anything, does it say anywhere there that that was a motion by the council and was approved by 6 votes of that council? We need a 4/5 vote in order to.
That required a majority.
It was a 5-2 vote, Hannah.
Yes.
For the
Yeah.
inquiry.
For the inquiry.
To
Yes.
make an inquiry.
But to request the authority to exceed the cap requires 4/5 of the council. We've never taken that vote.
Yeah.
Because they haven't
Because
exceeded
we
it
haven't
yet.
requested.
Because we haven't requested it.
If
Now,
I could
can we
just
go on
add.
with something else? This could go on until midnight.
First of all, I think it's important to realize, too, that the numbers that appear on that form that say that it's recommended is not the recommended charter budget committee numbers. And to come back to where I think why this might matter, and I don't know how much it matters, maybe the solicitor's partner can tell us, but as I understand it, the form that you actually signed as president of the town council was the one that ran
In the
papers.
newspaper.
So if I'm a resident at home, and as we know, there's only, 500, 800, 1,000 people can set the tax rate for 16,000 residents in the town, and they look at that form and they say, oh, okay, the proposed rate is 4.39%. What I'm concerned about is that we're not giving proper notice to the town. And I know we're hearing people that are involved watch this on TV, but as a legal matter, when you pick up the official warning of the meeting or the that form that has to be approved by the state, your other form was approved by the state too, I believe, that we haven't given the town proper notice. So that's what could be concerning, is that people might not be aware of how much exposure that they have.
I still believe that the official notice is there, and everybody who's lived in this town long enough, who is intending to come to the financial town meeting, will come to the financial town meeting. Because no matter what's proposed by the budget committee is not what's going to pass, and I believe that they know that. And I think
But
the
as a legal matter, I don't think they've been legally put on notice that there could be a cap break. There's been no legal notice. It's like due process.
And there wouldn't be, because you publish the document, and we do it by charter and by the law, we publish the document that the Budget Committee voted on as a recommended budget. That's the docket that they're going to receive when they walk in the door at the financial town meeting. That is the proposed budget. And everybody who thinks that they have a problem with the number that was allocated to them will be there to speak for a different number. Anybody who's been to financial town meetings in the past know exactly how it works. Somebody's going to come in and say, that's not enough money, we want more. And I don't care whether it be a department, whether it be a division, whatever it might be, that's the way it's always been, and they're going to come in and fight. And the people there are going to make determinations on every single vote, whether they want to give them any more money than the Budget Committee recommended or not. The issues that resolve around this cap, because up until 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't an issue because there wasn't one, and since that legislation, Piper Weed passed, we run into this situation, and I think that a lot of people need to get educated on where it is and where it stops. But they have to come to the financial town meeting to do that. It's open to everybody, to every registered voter. If only 400 or 500 people avail themselves of that, I think that's their problem. They need to come, and they need to be the ones. That's what they wanted, that's the position they wanted to take. My colleague said earlier, 3 times it's been brought up about changing the way we handle our finances in this town, and 3 times resoundingly it was defeated to retain the financial town meeting. That's the form of government the people in this town have wanted. Until they change that, that's the form they're going to get, and the results of that meeting are going to be what determines what the tax rate and what the tax is. That's how it's going to work.
As while the Budget Committee, just supplementing what Don said, the Budget Committee makes their recommendations. The council has the right to make their recommendations, and likewise the school committee.
I mean, that technically the council and school committee make requests.
Yes.
And the budget committee makes recommendations. The point I'm trying to focus on a very narrow point is that I totally agree with everything you just said about the role of the financial town meeting, but you still have to give the electors proper notice, and what it looks like to the person sitting at home reading the paper is that the town has recommended a budget of 4.4%. The town council appears to, or the town administrator, maybe the president of the town council, we're not exactly sure, has this exposure of 9%, but that's not putting the electors on notice of that.
Notice that that's not the budget we recommend.
Can I
Go ahead.
But that is not is what is put before the financial town meeting. We can sit here and say, let me finish. We can sit here and say it can be 9%, 10%, 50%. That is not our duty to put that before them. It's once it gets to the financial town meeting that they make the determination whether or not it goes above the request that has been put before them by the Budget Committee, which is 4.5. We don't go before them with another budget. That's what you are suggesting, that another budget be put before them.
No.
And there is no other budget.
No. What I'm suggesting, and look it up later if you want, but look up the Rhode Island property cap disclosure law, the one in 45-3 or something. The way that you're certifying these things to put in the official notice. That's what I'm talking about. This isn't about
That's
the
exactly
charter.
what we did.
Right, except I'm concerned that you have a separate document that's floating around and that may not give people proper notice, and I encourage you to look at that. I'll just leave it at that.
It's not another document, it's like an inter-office memorandum to the state. And to say this is going to be published is crazy. You know better than that.
The only people, if I might add.
Now I think
You know what, you're not going to get away
taking
with
it-
that kind of characterization.
I think
This is
there
a
are two
reasonable
extreme views.
concern.
I want to go back, and I think that this is a
Hang on.
concern for the future.
I understand.
If I need to say one thing about this floating around, please, okay? Mr. Nelson has a copy of it. Mr. Nelson got that from the Budget Committee. He got it from the Budget Committee. The only people that have a copy of that second notice, the unsigned disclosure statement, is myself, the treasurer, the Budget Committee. Those are the, and of course, the Department of Revenue. So if that is floating around town, It either came from the Budget Committee or the Treasurer.
That's not so. I pulled it off the website 2 hours ago.
Yeah, it's on the website.
Which one?
Don't we want it to be, are you saying
We
that?
don't want to confuse the people. We don't want to confuse the
Nancy,
people.
It's the clerk that puts out the official notice, and Mr. Coulter, you should realize that the warning and all the notices and all the advertisement, they do not enter anything other than the resolutions and the approval of the docket. In nowhere, other than the one advertisement that was put in the paper, which is the, I guess you've called it the April 6th Budget Committee comparison of the 2 years' expenses. That is the only notice that was publicized. The warning for the financial town meeting is what's going to give them their due notice. That has already been posted, and there is no mention of dollars and figures in those notices to
That's
people.
my concern, and I'm just
There-
sharing that concern
There is
with
none
you.
on that. So as far as, have we noticed the meeting properly? It doesn't matter what goes on wherever with me. I have proceeded to notice exactly what the statute and the charter informs me to do. And there's no way I have another, or entered any other figures into anything. The docket is printed as I received it from the Budget Committee. That docket is printed, we should have it probably tomorrow. And that's the only figures I deal with going forward, and that is where the notice comes from.
And I will also find out who put that on the web.
I'm not, I don't know if we're saying the same thing. I'm not worried that it's been, I'm worried that it should be. I hope that's a public document and that, because I don't see how that, I'm not saying you're doing the wrong thing by putting the warrant and not putting the notice on. I'm thinking, when I look at the Rhode Island Municipal Property Tax Disclosure Law, it seems to suggest that we need to put the electors on notice of what type of exposure they might have. You can't put the form in, says it's 1%, and then come to the FTM and vote 20%. I mean, that just fundamentally would be a concern, and I would just encourage you to
But they
consider that.
can, but that's just it, they can. Whatever the notice says, the proposed budget is, when they come to the financial town meeting, if they decide to increase any number, then they're increasing the amount, their exposure.
I'm not
But-
certain of that, and maybe you could take a look at that.
Then
That's
you're
all I'm
saying
trying to
everybody who
suggest.
proposes a change in the recommended budget of the Budget Committee
You know-
should be given public notice.
Every
That
financial,
doesn't
how many
make sense.
financial town meetings have you actually gone to? 3? 2. Well, I can tell you
Less
that
than you.
people here have probably been to the financial town meetings for 20 years. And the Budget Committee, sometimes their budget gets adopted, sometimes it doesn't. And people go and they look at the docket. And that is the notice that they have, and that's what they work with. And that has been probably true for 100 years. So to divert their attention and say, okay, look, hey, the school committee is proposing a greater amount. The Budget Committee is doing X. The town council would like to increase their budget to take care of things like the Economic Development Commission, the planning member, the league, the chamber that has just given us $80,000. People are going to know that. They look at their docket, that's how they react. And to cast it differently is a little misplaced.
No, once again, you're trying to score political points and bring up a very simple, somebody raised this concern that there's these 2 pieces of paper. I'm just asking you to go talk to your lawyers and look at the disclosure law, because there's at least an argument to be made that only one of them is in the paper, and that's all I'm trying to say.
That's all, just one in the paper. That's all.
The other one was informational, and I understood it to be for informational purposes, so that we don't have somebody putting a number forward that we can't sustain in a levy. And if the state says, no, you're not entitled to increase this by 1.4 million, you could only increase this by 700,000, it's a number that the people at the financial town meeting should be aware of before they start voting on this proposed budget. And I think that, I know my feeling is, I just want you to know what it is that could be generated by this, then you have the decision of how much of that you want to spend. It can be nothing. It can be all of it. But that's going to be decided at the financial town meeting. If you don't have the number, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble when you're voting on things and not sure where you can go with it. And that's my major concern.
And if I can mention just one more thing, if anything, if the Department of Revenue hopefully will send us a letter, and that letter would explain, and that's probably the thing that would get distributed, if anything gets distributed. Not two sets of documents that, in your case, appear to be the same, because they're taken out of context. We would never issue a package of 4 documents. The people wouldn't understand.
Yeah,
I mean, there's only one
agree.
piece of paper
I
that-
think we're actually in agreement.
I mean, I think we're taking this
we just-
way too far.
Yeah.
Now, that's the issue I want to follow up with, and then I promise I won't say more. on the
Okay, and
subject.
because we are really off the beaten
Okay,
path on
because
your...
you're right, but my concern is, going back to the last meeting, we are essentially circumventing the statute. And it was exacerbated by the fact that we used the forms, including the checklist for request to exceed property tax cap. Here's what we did. We provided all of the information for them to certify, but then we said, don't certify, we're just looking for information. Now stop and think of that for a minute. You know, I know, and everybody knows that if they come back with a number for informational purposes, they've used the information on the checklist, so that any number that they come back with before May 8th is in fact the number they would have certified. So all we've done is circumvent the statute. What we've said is, it's just informational. But in fact, the number that they come back with for informational purposes will be the exact same number, right to the penny, that they could have certified. I think there's something wrong with the process
But
like
isn't that the kind of information you need to have when you get to the financial town meeting, so no one exceeds that?
Then we should have voted to certify it.
I don't want to certify a number that hasn't been appropriated,
That's not-
because
but
I
that's
think
not how-
if you go to them and ask for it,
Jay-
you're not asking for that number, you're asking for what the...
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're in the Department of Revenue, and the town says, because the former director had suggested the town would be entitled to ask for the parameters of the amount. You might have drafted the letter differently, you might have had different attachments to it, Don might have done it very differently. But the fact is, the matter is that we asked for the information, and you're now the director. What would you have required?
Well, first of all, we've never asked for parameters. We have asked for very specific numbers.
Yes, we have.
And using the checklist, what we have asked them for informational purposes is to tell us exactly what they would certify. My response would be, I'm looking at this checklist, let's not play around with games. You're not looking for information, you're looking for a number that at some point could be certified, but you don't want to ask for the certification at this point, because as Hannibal suggested, we get back to the issue of whether or not you'd require a 4/5 vote. That's why I'm saying all of this terminology and then using this form to exacerbate the situation. As far as I'm concerned, we simply circumvented the requirements of that statute.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We've spent 20% of our time on an issue that is not on the agenda. I formally object to this whole discussion.
Okay. Town solicitor announcements.
We don't have any announcements.
It's time for executive session.
Okay. I will make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss litigation pursuant to, thank you, 46, 43.
We have a motion to enter into executive session on litigation under 46, 42, 46, 582.
Do we have a sergeant at
Second.
He's not here.
How good to have
I
him?
know, we're good to have one.
And to remain in executive session pursuant to 42, 46, 586.
Second.
We're still in session. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? We're now in executive session.